Are you ready to embark on a journey of success? To discover your true potential in the untold stories of careers in life sciences? Welcome to PATHFINDER by the Purdue Institute of Inflammation, Immunology and Infectious Disease. With your host, Tommy Soares, discover the untold stories of industry scientists and unveil the secrets to excelling in your career. Thank you for joining us once again, and remember to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tommy Soares. I'm Director of Scientific Strategy and Relations for the Purdue Institute of Inflammation, Immunology and Infectious Disease. And today on Pathfinder, I have the pleasure of welcoming Vicky Martin, who spent her early childhood in Southern California, moving to Southeast Michigan in elementary school. From a young age, her parents instilled in her a curiosity and love for learning that led her to explore a wide range of interests from grade school through college. Constantly wrestling with the question, what do I want to be when I grow up? Vicky continually tried new things to help her determine what she did and did not excel at or enjoy. As her academic career progressed through a PhD in molecular pharmacology from Purdue University, she felt simultaneously a camaraderie with her fellow scientists and a key sense that her personality was not quite a fit for many traditional scientific careers. After graduate school, she found herself working in clinical research, a role where her scientific interests, social nature, strong communication skills, and passion for helping others intersected and felt like a good fit. Vicky currently resides in West Lafayette, Indiana, with her husband and two boys, where she is Vice President of Regulatory and Clinical Affairs at FetTech, a medical device and regenerative medicine company, as well as President and Principal Consultant at Burrowwood Consulting. Her career journey and those she has worked with along the way have helped her to learn that people alongside you can be just as important as the task or mission, and the importance of recognizing, accepting, and building upon your own strengths rather than trying to be somebody else. She loves mentoring and has a passion for sharing these and other hard-won lessons with others. And I am so thankful you agreed to be on the program today. Vicky, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Welcome to Pathfinder.
Oh, thank you so much, Tommy. I'm really excited that we are finally getting to talk.
Me too.
This is great.
Me too. I've really been wanting for you to be on the program because I know you've had a career path that seemed somewhat traditional at the beginning, but now it's taken you in so many different adventures, and I want to learn all about it. I want us to be able to unpack a little bit of your life and what's been the trajectory so far. So if you could give us a start from wherever you want to start, I'll let you take the lead and tell us all about it.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I guess, gosh, I don't know where to start. I guess as it kind of said in my intro, we moved when I was a kid, and I think a lot of people do that, and it's not really that big of a deal. For me, it was kind of a formative experience because I spent most of my school age years, probably really up until the end of grad school. So most of my life figuring out how and when I was going to make it back to the West Coast. For some reason, just that was always a core part of my identity. My parents being from LA, I think that was sort of who we were, even though so I kind of felt like a fish out of water where I was growing up. And I always thought that, how do I get back there? And, the Bay Area has a lot of biotech type stuff. So there were lots of things in mind. And I think at the end of grad school, then when I started my career and ended up staying in West Lafayette, and I'm still here in West Lafayette by Purdue, it was sort of realizing that, I had held on to this one thing for so long as like a defining feature of me. And at the end, it actually really wasn't all that important. And really, uh, I don't think your location necessarily has all that much to do with your success and your happiness and all of those things. But it took me a pretty long time to learn that. So
That's incredible. And what a lesson. My goodness, because I think we all tend to have nostalgic view of our past and what it was like in our childhood. And that kind of keeps us from growing and experiencing life so much because we always want to get back to that state of like, I don't know if it was like normalcy or like, that again, that romantic view of what things were like when we were kids. But I wonder if that's like, is that something that is real, or is that something that we really keep thinking and sometimes we make it seem like it was nicer than it really was, or, you know?
yeah. Well, I was definitely guilty of that, I think in more ways than one. I mean, certainly thinking I always wanted to get back to the West Coast because that's who I am. I'm a West Coaster. I'm not a Midwesterner, which I've lived in the Midwest the majority of my life now, and I'm proudly a Midwesterner, although maybe not fitting all the stereotypes, right? But I think as you grow up, you start to realize that that's probably the case for everyone. But also as a kid, my dad was an engineer, and I thought I wanted to be an engineer. And um, I guess that sort of sets the tone for a lot of my career journey. I started out as a kid telling everybody I wanted to be an engineer. And as a woman or as a girl in the 80s and early 90s, telling people that I'm dating myself now, telling people that I wanted to be an engineer, the standard response is just all kinds of encouragement, right? Oh, we need more women in engineering. Oh, that's
Yeah.
excellent. Oh, you're so smart. Oh, you must be so talented. And as a kid, all of us have some level of insecurity as a kid. And so all of that validation really sinks in and you kind of internalize it. And so then I have this self image, right? That I'm going to be an engineer on the West Coast in California. I'm going to be a big shot, whatever. And you sort of wrap your head around that's who I am, that's who I'm going to be, that's what I'm driving toward.
Mm.
And I think a lot of us do that. And there's a risk that, I mean, for me, think obviously that's not where I ended up and not even close. Um, and I think I was definitely at risk for just continuing to follow. No, this is what I said I want to do. This is what everybody expects of me. And so this is where I'm headed. And luckily, a lot of things happened along the way that kind of helped me see that maybe that isn't where I was headed or where I was meant to be or what I was meant to do. And it's frustrating, right? It was a pretty winding path, but now that I'm older and wiser and can look back, I'm glad that I didn't just stick with this is what I've always said I wanted to do. And so this is what I'm going to do no matter what at all costs, because I don't know. I'm pretty happy with the way things have turned out, I guess.
Wow. And I think there's so much to that too, that it's almost like the kid version of imposter syndrome, isn't it? Like somebody says that you're gonna be, oh, okay, I guess that's what I am. That's where I'm gonna be. And as you said, it's like this image that you have of yourself because somebody has given you that image and you've adopted it and it's what it's gonna be. And but do you think that kind of um you had to uphold that image, right? Like you had
Hmm.
to, even if you didn't know it, even if you didn't, you had to believe it or feel it in a sense to keep saying that this is what it's going to be. Do you think that had a positive impact in keeping you driven to try to uphold that image in some kind of a way of how smart I am, how studious I am? I mean, were you a good student, Vicky?
I was a good student. I was always afraid of getting in trouble, and I was a very hard worker and always my own worst critic. And so, I mean, I probably was going to end up in, I always knew I was going to end up doing something awesome regardless. Right. And I really
Yes.
did. Yeah, I really did believe that I was going to be an engineer. My dad is an engineer. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but before she had us, she was a chemist. And so I just kind of, well, I come from science stock. I
Yeah.
like science. I liked all the classes, really. I really loved school. I was a big book nerd. You know, which is
Totally.
also it comes with its own set of challenges as a kid. Um, but yeah, and I think there was a lot of advantages in that because it pushed me to work really hard in school because I knew whatever I wanted to be, I needed to do well. And I loved school. So that wasn't a hard task. When you like something, you want to try hard at it and get better. But I think, especially then getting into high school, so kind of one of the pivotal places where I started to wonder what I was going to do. Um, because I was going to be an engineer. That's when FIRST robotics was brand new. I'm
Right.
dating myself again. It was really brand new. And so I joined the robotics team. My dad worked for General Motors. They had a team. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, this is awesome. And you get to go in and like play grown up because we actually got to meet at the tech center and you got to
Right.
see like the cubicles where the engineers were working and the lab where they had all the big trucks and equipment and it was so cool. And within that first year of being on the robotics team, I mean, I had a great time and I learned so much. And the biggest thing I learned was I don't want to be an engineer. This is awesome. This is great, but like it's not really for me. And I wasn't super enthused about it. And seeing the way engineers work together and the way that a good engineer thinks about problems. Um, and now I've worked with a lot of engineers in most of my career, so I can say this confidently. And it's incredible, and it's not the same way that my brain works.
Mm.
And so I I stuck with robotics because I'm not a quitter, and I was going to be an engineer. So I did it my sophomore, junior, and senior years of high school. Founded a team at my high school. So because it was things were growing. And so I was on the General Motors team and then actually founded the team at my high school and loved it and learned a lot. And by the time I was getting ready to graduate, I was not looking at colleges for engineering. Um,
Mm.
so, and I think the other big piece for me was, like I said, I loved school, but I really hated math. And I was really good at math. And so nobody understands it. It's like, it's really hard to explain to people. But I mean, I was 2 years ahead of the rest of my classmates in math. I got moved into like a year ahead. And then there was another thing and I got moved another year ahead. And I was really good at it and I was doing great. I remember telling my mom, school would just be so much fun if I just didn't have math class. That's the one class I can't stand. And
Really?
I was taking French and German. I was loving foreign language and English and my science classes, chemistry and biology and botany and all kinds of cool stuff. And I just didn't like math. And my dad's like, well, you can't be an engineer if you don't like math. And he's not wrong.
No,
Um,
not at all.
So he's like, so, you need to do. And so I worked really hard and I got my AP credits in high school and then never took a math class again. And that was what I was set to do. And that's what I did. And, so I think heading into college, I was really realizing I'm
Yeah.
probably not going to be an engineer. But I was still getting all of this feedback that, hey, you're good at science. That's where you should go. You're a
Right.
woman in science.
Yeah.
That's what you should do. And so I really just tried a lot of different things. I took as many science classes as I could. I was a biology major. Um, and so for a while, I thought I was going to be a plant geneticist. And I took botany and was like, plants are not my thing. This
Yeah.
is, I took genetics and I really liked that. I took biochem and I really liked that. So I just tried the basic biology classes I did not love. I was like, taxonomy and forestry stuff is cool. And it was all
Yeah.
really fun. But I would try to picture myself in that, doing that forever as a career.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's just a big difference, I think, sometimes between what we're good at and what we have a passion for.
Mhm.
And it took me a long time to figure that out, that just because you're good at something doesn't always mean that you're passionate about it. And I think a lot of times people get stuck doing something because they're good at it or because it's something they can do. And that just wasn't really the career that I wanted for myself.
Yeah. No, that's my gosh. And I've said many times in this program that you do sometimes end up finding a passion in what you're good at too. But there has to be something, there has to be a reason at the end of the day for you to keep doing that thing. And I am so intrigued about your math story. If you were good at it, if you were ahead, I mean, you like, did anybody say, hey, Vicky, like you could make some serious money being a math tutor, what, or something like that. And then you could go on vacations or whatever. What was it that you thought, oh gosh, this math thing, not so good for me and not so much for me?
I guess whenever I was doing math homework, I was just like, oh, I just
Yeah.
can't wait to get this done. Like it did not spark joy in the, in the current lingo. It did not spark joy.
Yes.
Um, and which I think was really, I will say I did get some negative feedback. I had a couple of math teachers there at the end, my pre-calc teacher and my high school calculus teacher, that both were kind of like, they could tell I wasn't taking it seriously. And in hindsight, I think they were probably trying to challenge me to work harder.
Yeah.
But I took it as very negative feedback that, like, oh, well, you don't think I'm doing enough. And I don't even like this anyway. So I'm just going to finish up and get out and be
Yeah.
done. Um, there's plenty of
Yeah.
other things I like. And I acknowledge that, I liked most subjects in school. I was finding that I was decently good at foreign language and English. I was really good at science and I was liking it. So I had other options. And so I don't think it's always a good idea to just walk away from something when it gets hard. That's not really what it was. It was just like, I just can't see myself doing this forever.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Crazy. That is
so
so crazy. Especially because we do use math in science, in biology a lot. Like if we're, making reagents in the lab, or if we're calculating something,
mhm.
probability of this or that, experimental design and all of that. I think, there's still so much of math that gets interwoven in our daily life, that it, was that at all the practicality of using math for making a certain concentration or something like that, a reagent? Was that all like intriguing afterwards? Did you enjoy that aspect of math?
I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but the types of math that you do as as a scientist, and then I guess I'll just say, going into clinical research, I never had to do my own statistics because I was working in industry, right? So I could be conversational enough to talk with a statistician, and I knew enough to be able to, like, okay, well, what about this, and I'm thinking about it like this. I don't know all the terms because I didn't do all that much that. And that's not true. I did take a biostatistics class in grad school. That's a requirement.
Yeah.
So that was close to getting back to math. But so I could be conversational about it because I was decent at it and my brain could think in that way. That was never my favorite part of the day,
Yeah.
having to sit down and do the calculations on for putting together reagents in the lab, or how long something was going to have to go, or what. That was all fine. And I didn't mind doing it because it wasn't my whole job.
Right.
I mean, I
Right.
think it is important to be conversationally capable
Yeah.
in the things you need for whatever career you're in, whether they're the best part of the job or not. You still have to be capable.
Yeah.
So
No, and I
yeah.
think I think I agree wholeheartedly with you that the homework was so boring because there was no application. It was just a question after question after question for practice. There was no real outcome that
Hmm.
one could see, right? And I think, as you progress more and more in your schooling and your education, you get to start to see a lot of the application of what you practice for so long and doing, which sucks so
Yeah.
badly.
And now I'm a parent and I tell my kids that all the time.
Yes.
So you're completely right.
Vicky, so
Yeah.
tell us a little bit, you decided genetics was your thing. You thought, okay, maybe plants not so much your thing, but genetics. There was something about genetics. What led you then to Purdue and to seek out this PhD here?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, so I was loving most of my science classes. I did independent study over the summer, doing cutting up caterpillars because we were doing some genetic research on, like, crop pests. And so harvesting caterpillar guts, and as one does as a biologist, and
Sure.
but I was loving biochemistry and all of these things. And so I think I was still struggling with, I like a lot of different things. I don't really know what I'm passionate about. There's not just one thing yet. And so I still didn't know what I wanted to do, to be honest. But I knew that in biology, for most of the things that I was kind of thinking sounded cool, I was going to need an advanced degree.
Mhm.
And so I actually specifically looked for, uh, and I only applied to these interdisciplinary programs where you could come in with a general life science type interest and check out a lot of different things and kind of figure out where you fit. And I'm so thankful those programs existed at the time that I was looking at grad schools. So I came into Purdue in the Pulse program, and but all the other schools that I applied to had similar generic interdisciplinary life science programs. And that's what I was applying to because I just knew that I didn't know for sure what I wanted yet.
Right.
And to be perfectly honest, I really saw that as a negative. I so my aunt is the OBGYN, and she was probably the one person in my family that I most idolized growing up. She's a very high-powered career woman, working in the hospital, and I thought she was the coolest thing.
Of
Um,
course.
and she was also the wife of my mom's younger brother. So she, anybody that's like younger than your parents, but still an adult is super cool to begin with. But I remember her saying that she knew since she was a little girl that she wanted to be a doctor, and she knew she wanted to be a baby doctor from like middle school. And I was so jealous of that. And I felt like then coming to grad school, that was all around me. Everybody was like, I've always known I wanted to be a scientist. Like, this is always, oh, this is just amazing. And I've always wanted to do this. And I mean, probably not everybody felt that way, but that's what I was hearing. And I'm sure that's what was sticking out to me of what I was hearing, because it was really striking me like, oh my gosh, do I even fit here? Like, I didn't know since I was little this is what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be an engineer, and then I was really loving my
Totally.
French class, and so like who knows, and I liked all these different things, and I felt like I was always so jealous of those people that just it was just so clear to them what they wanted to do,
Yeah.
you know. So I came to Purdue because well, twofold. One, like I said, the life science program, and two, because at that point I was just getting married and my husband wanted to be an engineer. Now, where is the irony in that?
Right.
so,
Right.
and so we were looking at places that we could both get into grad school and be happy, and had programs that both of us would do well. And of course, Purdue's mechanical engineering program is excellent. And so that's how we ended up um, coming down to West Lafayette. And I rotated through a lab in the chemistry department, a couple of labs in MCMP, I think a biology department lab. I don't know. I rotated through a few different places. And to be honest, where I settled on, I ended up picking a lab much more based on where I felt a personality fit than necessarily the research. I mean, at that point, like I said, I thought everything was cool. I mean, all this stuff is interesting, and like you said, it's finally really applicable. All of this stuff is really applying to some real problems in real life. So wherever I landed, I was going to be solving cool problems. So I really picked a lab based on personality fit, and is this a PI that I could work for the next 5 years? Are these lab mates that I can be around more than I'm around my husband for the next 4 or 5 years? Is this really a place where I feel like I can grow? And so for me, that was always really important. And now, several years into my career, um, I would say the same is true at work. I really think there's a lot to be said for who you're working with and the environment that you're in, um, to help you thrive as much or more sometimes than what you're doing, which was kind of a revelation, I think, for me in grad school.
Totally. Total revelation. And I mean, it's revealing even to me as you're talking how important it really is, the environment that you find yourself in and the fit. Tell us a little bit about the chemistry. Was it mainly with the prof, or the prof and the people in the lab? What was the big draw there?
I would say it was a little of both. I got along well with the other grad students, I think in all the labs I rotated in, as I think back. we could connect on different things and we all got along pretty well. So I think the deciding factor was more, that was important to me, but I didn't really encounter any difficulties with a large number of the grad students. There were some that I clicked with more than others, but it was definitely more the professor. So I was in Bob Galen's lab. He's since retired. But his personality just, it was a really good fit. I felt, to be honest, I think he was sort of like the dad of the lab. And he absolutely expected a lot out of us, but it wasn't in the same. I didn't respond well at that time in my life to somebody that's like super aggressive, and some professors, I think a lot of professors have the same expectations, but the way they communicate them can be different. And so I think I did much better. He set the expectations high in sort of like the way my parents had set the expectations high, where he made you want to do well. And so you ended up being your own, you ended up being your own harshest critic and pushing yourself to do well because you wanted to do well for the sake of the research in the lab and not because he was yelling at you or telling you you had to be there on a Saturday morning or anything like that. And I think that's as a leader, I don't know that he was doing that on purpose. I think that's just his personality. But as a leader, that's a really important way to motivate people, right? By getting them to want to do it as opposed to like dictating what people do.
Yeah,
So
and it sets a culture in the lab that is of a certain atmosphere, right? There's certain expectations, and people are really trying to get and meet those expectations too. There's a lot of that happening inside the culture in the lab too. Tell me a little bit about the work that you were doing, because that must have been also exciting at that time. And well, maybe even I did want to ask you, this Pulse program, it gave you that opportunity to experience some time in each one of these labs. Do you remember how much time you spent in the
I
different
think we
labs?
had 4 rotations during the school year
Mhm.
of our first school year. So it was, I guess a quarter in each one, I think is how it worked
Okay.
out. So I don't know how many, does that work out to like 8 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that. Enough time that you get to know people and you get to know the personality of the lab and you do a
Yeah.
little bit of stuff. But I mean, everything I was doing was running Western blots and gels and, those PCR and those sorts of things. I mean, I was in the same corner of life science, I think, in all the places
Yeah.
I went. So the technical skills were going to come, cell culture and all of those sorts of things. That was going to come no matter where I landed.
Yeah.
Um, but in Bob's lab, we were working on uh, a signaling molecule that he had discovered in his graduate days and then committed his career to researching, called SYK,
Yes.
aptly named because it's spleen tyrosine kinase, SYK, but he thought it was a fun name. So we worked on the SYK protein, and and I specifically worked on signaling from the B cell receptor in B cells. So it's a signaling pathway that's important in B cell cancers. And then they also found that it was important in breast cancer. So there was a chunk of our lab mates that were researching breast cancer. And we all worked together very closely. So even though my projects weren't on the breast cancer side, we all knew what everyone was doing and that sort of thing. So
So neat. It's so neat that that whole time and that period of camaraderie and your thesis and his project or her project. And I can imagine that it must have been also exciting to look forward beyond that and to get into industry. How was that transition from Purdue to your next step, your next company? And I think it was Cook, right?
it was Cook. Yes, the pyramid building here in West Lafayette, the coolest building in town. And
So,
and um and actually I remember touring that building because one of my lab mates who graduated several years before me worked there. And when they opened that building, we all got to tour it. And she invited us as her family because it was Family and Friends Day, and her family was all still back in China. So we got to go, the lab mates got to go as her family. And I remember being like, save me a job here. This place looks so cool. Um, But no, I think as the story of my life, I then, I found a lab and I loved what I was doing. But again, I was like, I don't think I want to work at the bench the rest of my life. And I definitely paid a lot of attention to the early career professors around me. And I was like, that's not the life that I want. I mean, it's pre-tenure professorship at an R1 it's intense, and I have ridiculous amounts of respect for all of those people, but I just knew that that wasn't going to be me. And again, I felt like I didn't fit in because I felt like everybody around me, and the typical personality for a PhD is really like, this is my field and I want to dig in so deep and I'm going to dedicate my life to learning about this section of stuff, right? You a mile deep in a
Yes.
narrow subject. And
Yes.
that just did not interest me. And so, again, here's another life transition, graduating from grad school. And what am I going to do? I'm not really sure. So I just started interviewing for anything that sounded interesting. And I was like, well, you throw your resume out there enough, something will stick. And I'll
Right.
just start there and we'll see what happens. And so I applied for some science writer jobs because I really found that I loved presenting, putting together PowerPoints and explaining to people who were not scientists or who weren't scientists in my field what we were doing, and like explaining something in layman's terms. I just loved that. And so I thought, but I don't really want to be a professor. So teaching is kind of off the table then, probably. So I applied to a whole bunch of different things. And I only applied at Cook because I had a friend from grad school who had gotten her master's and left a few
Yes.
years before me and was working there and was like, hey, we're hiring and this is a fun place to work. I think you should just come and try it. And sure enough, it was the same thing. It was like a 3 interview process. I probably met half the department. And I just felt like I could work with these people. I really clicked with this group and I could learn a lot from them. And what they were describing sounded exciting. So I hired in as a clinical project manager, which sounded perfect to me because it was like, oh, I get put on different projects. I get to work on the study design. Somebody else does the data collection, but I kind of oversee it. I get to be in meetings all the time because I love talking to people. I get to explain what we're doing to people that don't really understand. So there's a little bit of that teaching when it comes to like training sites on our protocol and stuff. I get to work with, there's somebody else that's going to do my statistics for me. I get to work with the statistician, but I don't have to, so it just, there was a lot of reasons it seemed kind of neat because again, I saw it as a weakness at the time, but an inch deep and a mile wide. That was always where I was happiest. I loved a new challenge, something exciting and different, running in 5 different directions at once, multitasking all day long. There was travel involved in the job, which I loved and was very excited about. That was always a highlight of my career. And it ended up being a really good fit. So I was at Cook for 12 years. And I moved from when I came in as a clinical science or clinical project manager. Um, we were all PhDs, so we were doing the science and the day-to-day project management and and the scientific conversations with FDA at the other end and kind of all of it. And then as the company grew, as is always I came in right as they were kind of the clinical group was going through some exponential growth. And as you grow, you have to reorganize. You can't have one person doing everything the bigger you get. So we had a big reorganization and the roles got split out. So I managed the project manager team, my project manager team for a little while, the regenerative medicine group. And then I really felt that I needed to be more over in the science side of things still, as opposed to in the operations piece. So I shifted over, stepped out of management so that I could get back into the science side of things. And I worked as a clinical research scientist. So more focused again on the science behind what we were doing and designing the studies and having the conversations with the clinicians about what should we do and how and what's next. And that was a lot of interfacing with product development. And so engineers, the
Mhm.
business side of things, which again was really cool because I liked learning about all the different things, and I was thrilled to sit in on a marketing meeting and hear what they were going to do with with something, or how what we were putting together, the data we were putting together, was going to be able to be used for a marketing piece 3 years down the road or whatever. I loved working in that kind of environment. So, and then I within Cook, that was one thing Cook I think always did very well is if you had an interest for something else within the company, they were very good at encouraging lateral movement, and moving around. So I started working for small little startup company within the Cook family called Cook Regentech. And I was their dedicated clinical person. And then after working with them for several years, I actually moved over there and started their clinical department. So then I got to learn about quality systems and building out a quality system from scratch and all of that stuff. And so every step of my career, I felt it was just a natural transition. I was just always curious and always asking and always volunteering for the things nobody else really wanted to volunteer for, right? Like, oh, we suddenly have to do post-market clinical follow-up because the regulations in Europe changed. We don't really have a system set up for that because we've never had to do that before. And I was like, that sounds cool and different. I'll try it. Put me on the team. I'll go, I'll go learn about it. And because
Yeah.
I always wanted to be working on what was new and different and not kind of a check the boxes, follow the line from A to B to C sort of thing. So I was always looking at what was cool and new and what's next.
That must have kept you obviously dynamically involved, but interested because it was always something new, some new challenge, some new perspective that you had to take. Did it ever, and as you were talking about that, mile long, inch deep description, I'm like, oh, that's like me. I think that's how I am too. And I really enjoy just that, like being able to multitask and being able to talk to many different people, help different people, connect different people, explain to different people, like all these aspects that you were talking about. And it seems like that you found your niche, maybe even from your description of your intro, in the sociability of that task or that role, in being always involved with so many different people, and not necessarily having to be the expert in that one theme or that one topic.
Absolutely. And I will admit that, especially in my 20s and early 30s, I was not necessarily introspective enough to have identified that on my own. It was more other people saying, like, a lot of people that are really, really good at science aren't very good at working with people, and you're really good at both. And it was like, oh, I mean, I just thought that I was pretty normal. I don't know. Or like I knew I wasn't like my peers, but I couldn't really identify. I had never thought of it as a strength before.
Yeah,
I had
yeah,
always sort of seen it as, oh, well, I'm really social, which means I'm not serious enough about my science.
yeah.
Right. But actually, I mean, and it actually took a long time, I think, for me to come around to realizing that um, it's not a bad thing, and it's actually a strength to be good at all these different things, and that you need different kinds of people, right? We need those people that can dig
Yeah.
just very, very laser focused and dig. Like we need those people, but if everybody was like that, then we wouldn't be able to be, like you said, we need those connectors too that are working, can translate what this person is doing over to these people that don't work in that field and don't
Right.
understand it. Um and that being different isn't bad. I think it took me a really long time to figure that out. But I did, because I was working with all engineers and scientists, right? So I always, and I think we also see what we want to see. And so when you come in thinking like, oh, I'm not as serious as everybody else, then you think they're all super deep into their topics and they're all so knowledgeable and I'm not. And then all of a sudden one day, you're in a job for a few years and you look around and you go, oh, I'm actually really, really good at this.
Yeah.
Everybody starts off not knowing what they're doing when they're brand new to a job.
Right.
And, then you're like, oh, yeah, I got this. And I'm starting to be the person that people come to for stuff because I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I think that's probably really obvious to a lot of people, but it was not obvious to me. And so it took a lot of other people kind of commenting on that. And so I try to do that now, especially when I'm mentoring somebody or if I have an employee um that I'm kind of helping groom up. I think it's important to give that feedback because you can't just assume that people see it for themselves.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And if there are any tips or tricks for letting people recognize what they've accomplished so far, to give them that boost, to give them that, that jolt of like, hey, you no, you got this. You've done this. You've been doing this for so long, and being able to have that confidence to move forward and say, oh, no matter what comes on my way, any hurdle, I'll be able to step over it, type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is really just the little things, like, especially as a manager, having a lot of employees, you know which employees are good at this versus good at that versus you're going to have to hold their hand for everything because they're not, or they're not hardworking or whatever. And so it's just little comments, it's just little, you don't have to make a big fanfare of everything. Everyone doesn't have to get a participation trophy. It's just little like, hey, you led that meeting really well today. Or like a specific thing, I noticed when you were leading the meeting today, the way you answered that person's question, you did this, this, and this. And I thought that was really good. So just little bits and pieces. And I don't know. I think people, if they're really looking, they'll internalize that or not, but it's always helpful to toss it out there.
Yeah, totally. If these techniques could be perpetuated, if we all did that, right? If we all gave a little bit of feedback so that people kind of recognize, oh, okay, I might have a weakness here that I need to strengthen or whatever that might be, I think we would move as a community. I think we're all very scared though, or afraid of insulting somebody or how they're going to take a comment or something like that. And so many times we keep our comments to ourselves and we don't necessarily vocalize what we should be vocalizing.
Oh, I think that's very true. I think it's even more true of constructive feedback, right? So I don't know if it ever worked or not, but with my employees, I always tried to make sure first you have to build the relationship. You don't actually care about the person, right? That
Right.
criticizing them is not helpful to them or to you. But
Right.
then like make sure once we had a relationship, that they knew I'm telling you this because I see potential in you and I want you to get better, or because I think you have the opportunity to go here and here's some things we can work on instead of you did that terribly, and I think again, thinking back to like my grad school days, and there's lots of different kinds of mentors out there, and there's lots of different styles of mentoring, and not everybody responds to the same style, but I tend to be a little bit more, um, I guess, gentle like that. And like, I'll just tell you, I'm telling you this because I think you have potential and I want you to go here instead of assuming that you'll know that, because I was never the kid that was going to know that. I was always the kid that was going to be like, oh, they thought I did a terrible job. Oh, no,
Totally. They're going to
and
be
so over
mad at
time,
me.
right, exactly. Like they're going to be mad at me. So I'll just say it. And I think it took a lot of years of getting comfortable with this whole jack of all trades thing. I'm good at this and that's okay. And then when I'm comfortable and confident, then I felt comfortable and confident to just be very open and honest with like my employees and my coworkers and stuff about, look, yeah, and here's why I'm saying this. Don't be offended because I don't mean it like this. I mean it like this. And here's what I'm saying. And just be really clear about it. And at the end of the day, if people want to get offended, they want to get offended. But I
Yeah.
think I mean, but I think you're right. I think out of fear of that, sometimes we don't give the feedback that people really need to hear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Vicky, I'm curious about FetTech. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Tell us a little bit about your role. What are you guys up to? And, all the good stuff.
Absolutely. Actually, that's our conversation is very timely. Um, so so I ended up at FetTech. There was some downsizing at Cook, and my company, Regentech, which is where I was at the end of my career with Cook, got closed down. And so I was laid off and I was very frustrated because I had really, like I said, I was still wrapped up in my identity of being a big career woman and this is what I do. And I had poured my heart and soul into that career. And then just all of a sudden it was gone. And so I decided I didn't want to just jump into the same position at another company. It was like, I kind of fell into this role, like literally just fell into it from a friend recommending me for an interview. So maybe it's time to just kind of take a step back, like pull my head up and look around and kind of see what else is out there and stuff. And so one of the artifacts of the positions that I had always been in at Cook was I did a ton of networking. And I've never been like a networker, but I just built a lot of relationships. I worked with a lot of different people. I worked with a lot of different vendors. I get along most of the time. I get along with most people. Um, And so I started looking around and I decided I wanted to start consulting. I was like, let's just see how this goes. I mean, if it doesn't go well, I can always go apply for my same type of role at another company. But let's just it seems low risk. I'll just give it a try. And I realized that not everybody has that luxury, but my husband had a stable job. And so we had like the ability, and I had a little bit of severance time. So I had the ability to just go give it a try. And through like a friend of a friend, I got connected to FetTech. So I did not know the company at all. And it's a small company. So at the time that I joined, I was the fourth employee. Um, but we got connected through a friend of a friend, and oh, you're looking at consulting. I just talked to someone who's looking for a consultant. So here, let me connect you guys together, kind of a thing. And it's been a really phenomenal place to land. So I do still do some consulting on the side. Like I said, I have a consulting company, but the bulk of my time is helping out at FetTech. So I do regulatory and clinical for them. We are 6 employees. So in addition to regulatory and clinical, I get to help out with most of the preclinical and R&D stuff. Our founder, it's a husband and wife that founded the company, and he is an engineer and she is a nurse slash marketing and sales type person. So they have very complementary skill sets. And so as the other scientist on the team, I get to help out with all the everything from, hey, we've got a cool new idea. Let's try and write a grant on it. Maybe we can do this. Let's talk about this animal study or this bench work that they're going to do. And all the way up to working with FDA and designing and running clinical studies. And so it's like every step of my career, things have gotten a little broader and my expertise has gotten a little broader. And this really feels like I think you're either built to be in a small company or you're not. And this whole jack of all trades thing, realizing that it was a good thing, then this was like the perfect place for me to land because we all help out with everything. I get to hear about everything because it's such a small company. So the technology we have is um, it's derived from pig extracellular matrix from multiple different organ types. And so that's the field of medical devices that Clay, our founder, has always worked in. And so he developed this multi-tissue platform, or MTP is what he calls it. And so it's really looking at the different aspects of different ECMs from different areas and what might be beneficial from different ones and taking a few together and putting them together. And so they have a powder product that's been on the market for wound healing since 2018 and performing very well. And so when I came on, they were in the process of developing a gel form of the material.
Awesome.
So I got to work closely on all the research and stuff that we did on that. And we've been working with FDA. And actually, I say it's very timely because we just got our clearance this week.
Oh,
Um, so,
wonderful.
um,
Congratulations.
yeah, so it was really fun. I worked a lot with regulatory as a clinical person at Cook for 12 years, but I'd never officially been in regulatory. But then you move to a smaller and smaller and smaller company, and each time your breadth of responsibilities gets bigger. And so it was like, okay, well, I guess it's my time to be a regulatory person too. And so it was my first submission that I pretty much wrote and managed entirely by myself because there was no one else. Obviously, Clay had gone through it before and was a great mentor and gave me a chance, but it's been a lot of fun. So, and just
That's
another
awesome.
one of those, okay, now I have this experience too. And now I've met these new people and have this network. And so, your career kind of progresses in that way, I
Yeah.
think, if you're looking for those opportunities.
That is so wonderful. And I totally like this whole jack of all trades, as you said, is probably what they need too. Also, it's like you're like a Swiss Army knife. You have so many tools and things that you can do. But so what's the challenge now? So you have clearance from the FDA for the gel product, and you
Mhm.
guys have to now commercialize this, push it out. What's that next big leap? Or do you have to get doctors to start using it and talk about it that way? What's the balance there, Vicky?
So yes to all of those things. So that's where this gets really exciting, right? Is that, in a big company, you're focused on clinical research, you kind of do your part and you hand the clinical data off to somebody else and then it goes and you kind of see it from a distance. And now I get to see it all up close, right? So we have a marketing and communications person, and we're starting to talk with KOLs. So we're having conversations with clinicians, key opinion leaders. Sorry, we're having conversations with clinicians now about being able to start using it now that we have clearance, and then looking at when and how can we launch the product. And so I get to learn all about the operations side of, you know, logistics and packaging and manufacturing and all of that stuff that goes into having enough of a physical product to launch it. Right. So, so it's really exciting. So I think over the coming months, keep an eye out. It's going to be big and exciting, but really what it comes back to is I feel like my entire time at Cook, I worked on a wide variety of things. When I was in grad school working on B-cell signaling, hopefully someday to develop a therapy for cancer, because I worked in the cancer center at Purdue. That's where our lab was. You know, at the end of the day, it's always been heading toward a patient and helping somebody out. And my one of our co-founder, Danielle, she always likes to say, we're all going to be a patient one day. And she's totally right. And so when you think about that, and as you've had friends and family, or maybe yourself that have been a patient, it's very exciting. And I feel like each step I get a little closer. And so now I'm feeling very close to getting to see this really helping patients and helping heal wounds. So we're very excited.
Must be so fulfilling too. It must be like such a great, awesome feeling too, that to know that you're getting closer and closer to that, having that impact. My goodness, Vicky, is there anything I didn't ask you that you wish I would have asked you? It's been so thrilling to hear about this whole journey so far, and now at FetTech, it's awesome, just great.
Gosh, I don't think so. I guess, you know, if I could say one thing to like the grad students that are there trying to figure out what their career looks like, it took me a really long time to learn this, but you know, it's never a straight path for most people anymore, right? And you don't always have to know what things are going to look like 20 years from now. It's really just what's the next step, and take that next step. And as long as you're always doing the best you can, you know, things seem to work out. And sometimes they don't seem like they're working out. You know, getting laid off was a big challenge for me, and it felt like nothing was working out, and all of that hard work was for nothing. And then where I've landed, I'm just getting all kinds of new, even more exciting opportunities. So, you know, I think as long as you keep pushing and keep trying and work hard, things do work out, and you just have to kind of put your faith in the process, I guess. And, you know.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for those words of wisdom and guidance. Vicky Martin, Vice President of Regulatory and Clinical Affairs at FetTech, thank you so much for being our Pathfinder today. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate all the lessons and all the great insights you gave us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Tommy.
Awesome. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us once again, and remember to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.